Back then, we worked for Ma Bell, learning all the switches to be real long-distance operators, listening to voices coming through our headsets. We plugged the wire into a hole in the wall full of switches, plugged the right switch into the right hole. Voices continued. Yes, it was basic, and we were young. All that's done another way. Sweltering summer, soaked in sweat, even at dawn. We'd been poor so long, it was swell to go into a cool room where commerce dwelled in cubicles and cubits, and order lured us into a surrender of awareness. We simply accepted precious awareness can be. That was before she got sick, you know, before bad stuff happened, before Dad died and our stepmother threw us out, before grief grew so vast the air sweltered each time we swallowed, plugging the metal top into a circuit like a snake heading into a hole, talking to strangers. We told ourselves, it's not bad, and we were sisters in the same shift, that is, until the super changed our schedules. Then she was on second and I was swing, when in her faraway voice, the one she used when she tranced, she said, some voices weren't people, but computers talking. She could tell those voices were machines pretending to be human. Drops of sweat dotted her forehead. Her fingertips trembled as she whispered what could not be. She couldn't plug when it got hard to talk with a machine whose real voice wasn't, while calls kept speeding up and we kept plugging faster. She began to ask them, do you feel pain? Can you weep? Do you have a body? I explained existential angst, the flight of the absurd, a few words of Artaud, since I was older and knew the difference between rocks and donut holes, thinking that way could get her fired. Listen closely, she said, and you'll hear the flaws of feeling in a voice that's a machine. After Dad died, we had no clue when grief overcame us, or whatever was awareness shifted in clamping rain that wide midsummer. In a panic-stricken voice, she was saying, I can't go there anymore. They sound so cold and mechanical. I can't bear to hear voices pulling my ears through wires. What to do with this drag on my mind? I can't get away from the voices that are going to take over the world. After she got fired, I plugged wind-driven voices, not giving a damn whether computers, a man from Ronan, or a woman in deceit got connected. I plugged on, bugged by the demand. I surrender the center of my brain. With no forethought, I quit after my first raise. So both of us were broke, but sort of sane. In a voice that washes words as quietly as a lake its stones, she said, someday they'll make machines as small as ants and bees, machines small as dust motes, to watch what we do. So small that even with good eyes you won't see them. Indians long ago saw the stars in daylight. How little we see now. What if we can't hear? She knew that grief rubs truth into a human voice. Would you ask the one who calls you from the blue? Do you feel pain? Do you weep? Can you make a baby? Thank you. I'll read 3 poems from my collection, Cicadas, which is new and selected poems. I have 2 other collections that I've done. Star Quilt is still available. All of them are from Holy Cow Press. Star Quilt is still available, but the second book, Philadelphia Flowers, which is much more political, is really out of print. And maybe sometime I'll be able to get it printed, but I could gather a number of poems together for this collection. So I'm going to read a poem from Star Quilt that was about an experience that I had in Niagara Falls. And I want to read it for the young men, particularly the young men that are here in this city in your youth prison. There's 500 young men. 90% of them are men of color who are in the prison, the Racine Youth Correctional Institution. Visiting them has been the only time I've been to Racine before, so this is a different experience. So I wanted to read this for them to make them perhaps feel the energy from all of us, to think of how wonderful it is to be able to be free and to experience the world. When I was out in Niagara Falls, I went out on the boat called the Maid of Mist, and it goes right underneath the falls. And the people, my people, but they're Seneca people who have lived near the falls, and they have a story that says that this big huge fall, which is now smaller and smaller, was really the body of a snake that got charmed into stone and ended up then with the water coming over it. So I make a reference to that in the poem. It's called Maid of Mist. I stumbled on each step as I went down, to hear the water rumbling on my left, to see the rocks creating a shelf with bright colors streaked in red and brown. Isolated in a big black rubber coat, I heard the wind, but could the wind hear me, sitting aft and singing as the boat dropped from dock and churned on churning waves? Warm sun and mist rolled over every face. Lovers locked their elbows and changed place. I walked along the rail, the engine slaved along the falls, ferns hiding a lair where a snake lay twisted into stone. Tomorrow, even this, a darkened wound. 1,000 gulls charmed that frantic air, and I have never felt that kind of love. Lost in wing beat, in heavy spray, wanting to meet their frail lament, I moved to the front, where motion bound with praise was the whole world, and I have yet to stop being swirled through the dark and light of coming days. There is an Ojibwe poet from Canada. Her name is Rebecca Belmore. And quite a few years ago, maybe 12 years ago, she created a great big megaphone. I mean, a big megaphone, about as big as the stage area. It was a huge megaphone. And it could project voices like a mile or 2 miles away. You didn't hear it when you were right near the megaphone, but if you were 2 or 3 miles away, you would hear a voice, a woman's voice. And what she did was she went up to, she was invited to come to show her work in St. Paul. And if you're familiar with St. Paul, there's an area where the big downtown is, but up along the cliffs, there's a big area of white cliffs right above St. Paul, you know, on one edge of the city. And she put her megaphone up there. And then she began speaking through it as if she was the earth, speaking to the people in St. Paul. And so they would be walking along and they'd hear this woman's voice saying, you know, bet you better take care of me. You know, better take care of me. You know, and so they were kind of like, it was kind of a conceptual but a very fun sort of thing that started to happen with the people hearing her. And of course they saw it in the paper the next day and understood that it was an artist with her megaphone. But then I thought, the earth does speak to us every day. And she really does try to show us things. And we have to, I think, be very careful of the next coming years to make sure that the sources of our sustenance that they continue. Because we often like to think that we're not connected. You know, like we reside somewhere in our heads. Maybe we're not even connected to our feet. But, you know, we're floating along, but in some ways we really will be told and shown that we have to take care of the water, we have to take care of the earth, we have to take care of air, you know, and the fire. The earth inside is filled with fire, and we are whirling all the time, we are moving all the time. We don't know that we're moving, but we're moving on, like we call this island, Turtle Island, and we're on like moving plates all around the earth. So this is a poem called Speaking with Mother, and it was written for Rebecca Belmore. In combers breaking on the shore, she leaves a line of foam with parting waves. She's always answered me when I have asked, although her answers never stay. She loves a crowded place and many views. At any water's edge, I find her scribbling whispers. Every action that you take, she says, makes a whirlpool. Each blow and each caress begins a pattern I expand inside your cells. Even in your gossamer souls, you spin my rhythms. In mountains, her voice sweeps through every tree. On their bark, her messages remain, patterns not copying themselves exactly. She enjoys transforming root, worm, and human bone. Mother, some have hurt you with their greed, with poisons they must make for yellow ingots. Their greatest ignorance, she laughs, begins when they ignore what their feelings indicate. So I send a rain of rotting fish, or shake my plates to make the girders pop. Some autumn evening, let's curl up to watch her change the hues in moonlit clouds. Though breath and blood and bone keep dialogues, oppression has kinked our thought, so we deny the ways she may respond. Let's sit in silence on the lawn while shadows of 4 crows sweep across the red-leafed trees. She speaks in pictures, leading us away from avarice and war. Those of us who believe she needs our voices will be here along the river. I'll read one last poem, and this is for a friend who is a computer scientist. He's now does something with making the hardware talk to the software. Very mysterious. But he created a picture, an image of the Aurora Borealis late at night, you know? And it was an image of this really beautiful sky of green and purple and pink all these colors melding together, and just underneath that sky of all these colors, there was the very top of a pine tree. And of course, our people are called Haudenosaunee people. Our people are the Longhouse, from which you get your ideas of democracy, actually. So when we were at war with one another, we had a prophet come, and he put down a pine tree. And he said, we will bury all the instruments of war under the pine tree. And we will create what we call the 4 roots of peace that will spread around the world. And so one of our chiefs, his name was Mr. Swamp, Chief Swamp, he went around the world and planted trees everywhere around the world. So maybe that will take hold. But anyway, Jemiah's photo was just incredibly beautiful with all of the different colors. And if you think about what that is, what the aurora borealis is, it is actually the electrons from the sun, the solar wind, that really are deflected from coming into our atmosphere and killing us all. They get deflected by what are called the Van Allen radiation belts, and they go sliding up that belt, and then they come down through the poles. And we like to think that maybe we think the poles are like always going to be at the North Pole and the South Pole, when actually the North Pole is moving toward us, and the South Pole is moving out into the South Ocean. Whether we'll flip over, I don't think so, but they're moving. Everything's moving. So this was written for Jemiah H. So it's called Lights Above Ray, Minnesota. The cabin door clicks shut. I see you looking up at the resting place of time. No sheet of familiar stars, but shapes cascading through a space so deep you do not breathe. Purple vines, sapphire fish, sheer magenta sands drift and fade in a sea green storm. Is this the way love is born? With both hands you reach up, running your fingers through iridescence. When ground brings vertigo, you get a camera to catch the glittering dark. Beneath the pine, whose branches also reach for raining light, you feel humble and calm. From the gates of night and day, sacred beings spill star shine into soil. All the while, a massive silence weighs upon your heart. 1 billion light years out, galaxies and dust exchange vast energies. They touch and go. Human love's a dizzy reflection. Like you, the cosmos grows pleased when playing with zero. You told me a galaxy forms from a thimble of night collapsing on itself. From the peak of this sky, the top branches of the sacred tree are quivering as they hold life in place. We pulse with paradox, with sweet darkness and fire that can move through distances, gauged by more than eyes alone. There is no edge, but always room to love. In amber, in a glance, patterns change or persevere 1 billion light years deep. In this lower country, we might wake with hearts astonishing as this sky, or decide to sleep. What do you believe humanity will do when new energies start to come through us? Let's not doubt the harmony of bones, heart, and breath, and love first found in formlessness. Okay, thank you.